Okay, so welcome students. So today we are going to start with MySQL, which is a SQL database, and this is just we are going to take a kind of a revision tour. Okay, so already we have worked with MySQL, and we know the importance about MySQL, why exactly we need it. So let me just play the PPT. So MySQL children, it is a RDBMS software, that is a relational database management system. And whenever we want to store data, so we require a database. We require a database software. So RDBMS is a relational database management system, and that R, basically we have that word R, the character R is because we have, in this kind of database, we have tables. And then tables have, the database have tables, and the tables have the field, and these tables are connected with each other. These tables are connected, so we say that there is a kind of a relation with the one table is related to some other table, and that's the reason it is called as RDBMS software. So today children, already we know the basics of MySQL, and just we are going to go through some of the constraints, how to use these constraints while designing your database, while designing the table. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to MySQL, and I won't go to the workbench because there are a lot of things that get automatically, you can just, it's a gives you a GUI facility by which you can just just you have to click few things and the commands gets executed automatically. But as a student, you should be able to run the command. You should know the command, what exactly the commands are. So let us just work today with the MySQL command line client. Okay, so this is the option that I'm selecting. Okay, so the first thing that it is going to do is it is going to ask you a password. Okay, before I go ahead, let us just do some changes because this is a black screen. So give a right click at the top, at the top, that is the title. Okay, just over here, and go to properties. Once you go to the properties, this particular window is going to pop up, and you have to go to the font option, increase the font to 36, then go to the layout. Okay, layout you can keep it as it is, then go to colors, then the background color of the screen, that is black, you can change that to maybe something like this, and screen text you can keep it as black, and then click OK, and just click OK if any message comes, and then you can see I've just changed the layout of my screen. So we are going to work with the shell mode, that is a command line mode, and first thing that it is going to ask you is the password. So I'm going to give a password. So this is the same password that you need to give for your workbench. So once you enter the workbench, and it is going to ask you a password or the database that you're working with. So I'm giving my password, and then it is going to give me the command prompt of MySQL. Now the first thing that you can do is just clear this particular screen. So how I'm going to clear the screen, the command is system, then space and cls, and then give a semicolon followed by the semicolon. So system space cls and then the semicolon, and just press enter. So now we have cleared the screen. So let us start executing some of the commands that we have learned in class 11. So how to create a database, that's the first thing. So I'm going to create a database with the command that is create database, and let us call the database as Sunbeam. So that's the first command, and every command will end with a semicolon, so that's the end of the command basically. And then you press enter, and what is going to happen is one database is going to get created. And then if I have to use that database, that is Sunbeam, so how I'm going to use that is I'm going to say use and space and then Sunbeam, give a semicolon, and now we have changed the database. So we are now into the Sunbeam database. We have switched to Sunbeam database. So now we have created a database. So the first thing the database we need to do is we need to provide a table. So let us go ahead and provide a table to the database. So I will say create, and name of the table you have to provide, that is student. So that's the name of the table. Then the opening bracket, then you can press enter if you want, otherwise you can keep on typing, but it's better to give a enter, and then you can see a proper structure of your table. So the first thing that we need to provide to this table is the primary key. So ID is always going to be there because ID is going to be the primary key. Remember, every table in MySQL or any of the RDBMS software, every table will have a primary key, will have a unique key. That is very, very important. So I say ID is my primary key, and normally this is by default the name that we have, and it is better to keep it that way because the user is not going to be concerned with the ID. It is only that we as the developers are concerned with the ID, and we know what ID is. So ID, and then I give a space, and then I have to provide the data type. So the data type that I'm providing out here is integer. So integer data type. Then you can give a space, and then what you can do is you can uh, specify this as a primary key. That's the first thing. And what you can do is also you can do this as auto underscore increment. So what will happen is it is automatically going to get increment. Okay, so you can use this particular command, that is auto increment, but I'm not going to use this at this point. I will just keep it as primary key, and I'm going to feed the data into the ID. But normally this does not happen. It should not happen. It is, you have to keep this as an auto increment, and because then every time you have to give a value to the ID, making sure that it is a unique number. It is not a duplicate number. But anyway, it's the initial stage. We are going to keep this as a primary key itself, and I'm not going to keep that as an auto increment. Let us just make few mistakes so that we can learn about it. So that's the primary key. So I'm specifying ID as integer and primary key. Then you have to give a comma, then give an enter, and then I provide something like roll number. So that is roll number, and the data type for this will be also integer. And okay, let it be as integer. Then I can provide name and provide char as maybe 100, then a comma, and then maybe a class that I will provide, that is of 20 characters, and then this section that is also of characters. I'm going to provide this as 20 characters. Okay, so that is 20 characters, and now what we are going to do is the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to give a check to the roll number. So I'm going to use that check constraint, and I'm going to say that the roll number should be should be greater than 1, right? Should be greater than 1, or sorry, should be greater than 0, right? So that is a check that I'm going to put into my table. So every time I feed in the roll number, so it is very important that I give a positive number that is greater than 0. If anything, if the user tries to give a negative number, 0 or less than 0, then it is going to throw an error, and that check is actually very important to make sure that the right data is getting fed by the user. So that is the constraint, and then that's the last thing that I wanted to do in this particular table, and then give a closing and a semicolon. the closing bracket. Okay, so you can just check out here that id, again I'm going to repeat, id is an integer which is a primary key, and roll number is an integer. We are going to store the numbers, name as character, that is of 100 characters, class as char, that is of 20 characters, and then section char as 20 characters, and then this is a constraint that we are checking, and this is the bracket, this is the closing bracket, and then the at last the closing bracket of this one, and then semicolon, and I press enter. Okay, there is a kind of an error that we need to check. Okay, so now what the problem that we have is this particular thing is that we have to type in everything again. Okay, so we cannot just copy paste this. Okay, so anyway, let us just check what exactly the error is. So it says that version of the right syntax to use a near student. Okay, so create, okay, I did not use a d word, that is table. So let me just quickly, okay, let me just try this. Okay, and I say system cls, and I paste this. Okay, we have this, but then again I cannot go over here and type in something. Okay, so it is going to give me the error. No issues, children. Let us, this is just a practice session. Okay, so I forgot, that is create table and then student. So make sure you do not make any mistakes while typing. That is the name of the table, and then I press enter. That was id, and that was integer, and integer as specified as my primary key. Hope everything is fine. Create table student id as integer, and that as specified as primary key. The next I'm going to do is I'm going to give name as, that is of 100, and okay, I forgot the roll number. No issues, we're going to put the roll number later on. I'll put it over here, no issues. Then roll number as integer. Okay, then I can give my class, that is of 20 char, then as section as char, that is of 20, and then what I wanted to do is just apply the constraint, that is check that roll number should be greater than 0, and that is the last thing, and give a semicolon, and that's it. Okay, so hopefully this is going to run for us, and yes, it has successfully executed the command. So now we have successfully created a table as well. Okay, let us feed some data into this table. So how we are going to feed the data? And before I go ahead, so we have used that check a constraint. Okay, so just quickly, let us just give some data. So the command that I'm going to use over here is, it is going to be insert, and what's the command? The command that we have is insert, then we have insert into, if I'm not wrong, into, and the name of the table was student, and then I need to provide, okay, then I forgot to give values, and that is very important. Okay, values, and then I need to provide the values over here. So make sure you provide the values the same way, the same order that we have the fields. So that is id, so that is integer, name, so I'll provide my name, and roll number, again it's an integer. So make sure integer values, we don't need that single quotes, but since a j, that is a char field, you have to give that single quotes. Okay, please make sure that, but this is integer, so no need to provide anything. So if you provide, then it is going to give an error, children. Okay, so for integer numbers, straight away provide the numbers. For characters, provide that into the single quotes. So now I provided the roll number, and then I'm going to provide the class, that is this one, and section I'm going to provide as a. So I hope everything is done. Okay, this is just one line of code, so I can copy this, do not worry, and then I press enter, and yes, it has worked. So these are the values that have gone into the table, and now if I want to check my table, I'm going to say select star from, and from, that is student, and it is going to display the table. So you can see, let me just again run the command, and I'm going to say select star from student, and this is the table in front of you. So this was one way of doing it for inserting the values. And I know we are going to work out with all these constraints, children, one by one. I'm going to tell you how this constraint works. So I've just showed you how to work with a check. And I guess not null, everybody knows what is not null. So if you want to keep any of the field which cannot be empty, for example, I say insert and into student, and insert into student, and then values. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is you know I'm going to provide the ID, that is 2. I need to provide 2 out here. I need to keep that as unique. And okay, let me just provide 2. That's it. Okay, and I press enter. So it doesn't match the count. Okay, what I'm going to do is insert into student, and then what I'm going to do is only I'm going to specify the ID. Okay, ID and then the values. Okay, I'm going to tell you how this works, and this is going to be 2, and that's it, semicolon. Okay, and it says that one row has been affected, which means that this particular command, this particular statement has successfully executed. What I did out here is, suppose if you really want to provide only data to a particular field, suppose it is only for the ID, so I just provide the data for the ID, and rest of the data for the rest of the fields I did not provided any kind of data. Okay, so if I really want to provide the data only for ID, so you can specify that particular field, so student ID. If I want to provide for ID and name, if it would have been that condition, so ID comma name, and then I can provide the values, that is 2 comma whatever name you want to provide, that you can do it that way. Okay, so let us now just check that select star from student, and what data do we have in the table. And you can see the data that we have in the table is, first row is 1 J1, the data is present, but for the second row we just have the primary key, and rest everything is null. So if you really don't want that the user shouldn't be allowed to do this, so what you need to do is, while creating the table, so I'm not going to run this because already we have the table, but I'm going to show you how to work along with that. So I'm going to say system cls and press enter, and then I'm going to say the command that I'm going to use is, okay, create table student. This would have been the way I should have done if I did not wanted null. So I would have said ID as integer, set that as primary key. That was the first thing, and the second was maybe the roll number as integer, and then was the name. Okay, I did not show how to keep that as not null. I'm going to show it over here. So char, then I'm going to provide that as 20. Okay, and then not null. So if I specify name as not null, so I cannot keep that as empty, and then and so on, children. You can just specify class char of 20, and that also, if you want, you can keep it as not null, and at last you can provide that is you know section not null. So at the beginning, when you work with this command line mode, at the beginning you might feel a bit uncomfortable since you have worked with Workbench, but as you just spend some time with it, and it becomes a second nature for you. Okay, it becomes very normal afterwards. And believe me, once you work with the command line, it actually will force you to give the right commands. So when you start doing that, that if there is something wrong, you're going to type that again, and you're going to keep that practice, and this is going to help you to memorize your commands for the exam. So it's better to work on this particular mode for your exam point of view. Work with this particular mode, and practice. Once you practice with this particular mode, on a command line mode, on the shell mode, all the commands you're going to remember for your exam. Okay, and now if I just give this, it is going to give me an error because the student already exists anyway, because there is already a table with the name student. But I just wanted to show how to use that, and the same way you can do it, children, for table, student. And if I really want something that should be unique, so if I say id as integer and set that as primary key. Okay, and then second thing that I can do over here is how to use that unique. And unique I'm going to use is the unique constraint. I'm going to use that as roll number. If I give that as integer, and I'm going to keep that as unique, and it's very important that every student in the class should have a unique roll number, isn't it? So roll number, I'm going to keep that as unique. But this does not make sense out here, because this is a table which is going to store the data of the entire school. So in entire school, in every class, there is going to be a student of roll number 1. So it doesn't make practical sense out here, but just I want to show you how you can use this particular constraint. And the last one, that was some default value. So you can add some default value like name, and then I give char as 20, and then you can specify some default value to it, like not provided. So this is the default value that I'm providing. So in case if the user does not provide any value in the name, this particular data is going to get fed into the name. Okay, so this is how you're going to use that constraint, children. So I hope this particular everything is clear to you. It's just the beginning. We are going to really going to go deep into all this now. Okay, so I'm going to keep short for today, children, and tomorrow again we are going to meet, and we are going to really understand all the deep concepts of MySQL. Okay, so that's it, children. Bye for now.